Alright, all you cool cats and kittens. Today we're going to talk about the demand for money, and we're going to introduce a new graph that you'll need to know, the money demand graph. Okay, so you're probably thinking to yourself, well, isn't demand for money always high? Well, yes. Okay, if you think about it, people always want money. They're always going to want cash. However, we've classified money in two different ways, M1 and M2 money. And really what we're talking about here is, when do people need M1 money? Alright, so when we're talking about the demand for cash, we're talking about, or demand for money, we're talking about the demand for M1 money, the most liquid type of money. So at any given time, people demand a certain amount of liquid assets or money for two different reasons. Alright, first is transaction demand for money. So people hold money for everyday transactions. If the prices of things start to go up, then the demand for money will go up. The other thing is asset demand for money. So people hold money since it's less risky than other assets. Alright? So you might be willing to go and put money away into different stocks or bonds or things like that, but there's risk involved in that. So you know money is money. And yes, you know it's probably going to lose money over time, or lose value over time, but for the most part it stays less risky. So what is the opportunity cost of holding money in your pocket or your checking account? The answer is interest that you could be earning. Now we're going to be talking interest in a couple of different ways here, right? You got to look at interest in terms of borrowing and interest in terms of saving. All right? So if interest rates are high and you're borrowing, that's a bad thing. Okay? Because now you have to pay more money back. But if interest rates are high and you're saving, that's a good thing, because it means that you're going to be saving more money or earning more interest over time. All right, so the demand for money, we're going to be thinking a little bit in terms of saving and borrowing, but let's focus on saving a little bit here. So the demand for money, so what happens to the quantity demanded of money when interest rates increase? Well, the quantity demand will fall, because individuals would prefer to have high interest-bearing earning assets instead. In other words, we're not going to want to keep money in our M1 accounts. We're going to try to move it to another account, maybe buy some real estate, maybe put it into a savings account, maybe some CDs or some other interest-bearing assets, okay, stocks, that kind of stuff, right? If we can earn higher interest, we're going to keep it in a place where we can save it. But what happens to the quantity demanded when interest rates decrease? Well, the quantity demand for money is going to increase, because there's no incentive to convert cash into interest earning assets. Right? Meaning that we're better off with the cash that we have instead of going and buying those assets, because we're not earning very, very high interest. So there's an inverse relationship between the interest rate and the quantity of money demanded. All right, just like every demand curve, it is downward sloping, and here it is. So the demand for money, if you notice on the x-axis, we have our nominal interest rates. Okay, eventually we will get to a point where we talk about real interest rates, but we're talking about nominal interest rates here. And then, I'm sorry, I said x-axis, that's y. And then on the X down here, we have our quantity of money, all right? So in billions of dollars. So there's an inverse relationship between the rates and the quantity of demand, all right? So as interest rates decrease, there's a lower opportunity cost associated with holding money in your pocket or your checking account. In other words, you're not going to be taking that money and putting it into other assets, all right? So there's going to be a higher quantity of dollars demanded. All right, so you have a downward sloping curve there. All right, so the demand for money, what happens if price levels increase? All right, now usually when we talk about price increasing and decreasing, we're usually talking about a movement along the curve. Well, we don't have price on the y-axis here. Okay, we have interest rates. So price level, if you think about it, if price level inflation goes up, okay, what do you think people are going to want more of? Well, money. So in this case, a price level increase would be an increase of your demand for money, your money demanded. All right. So there are shifters for the money demand curve. Okay. One is the change in price level. All right. The next is changes in income. So if people are making more money or less money, they're going to have more of an incentive. For example, if you make less money, you're probably going to want more money on hand, more liquid assets, so that you can pay for things. And changes in technology. All right, and you're wondering, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, think about your Apple Pay, okay, on your iPhone. That is just a credit card. And so really your demand for cash or demand for M1 money has gone down because you have that Apple Pay. All right, so changes in technology, things like credit cards, that kind of stuff, make it easier to pay for stuff when you don't need the actual M1 money. Supply for money is pretty easy. So the U.S. money supply, in theory, is set by the central bank. Okay, in our country, we call that the Federal Reserve, and is independent from the interest rate. So pretty easily, our money supply is just perfectly inelastic. All right, it's set by the central bank. All right, so in theory, let's say it's $200 billion is what they have, in this case, the central bank for this particular country. Our demand for money could shift left or right, and that's going to change interest rates, but our money supply is our money supply. All right, it's a finite number that they can change and adjust, obviously, with that money multiplier. Okay, so your equilibrium point, we see interest rates here, so we can probably think about how monetary policy is going to work. They can increase and decrease the money supply, and that should increase or decrease the interest rates. So the Fed is a nonpartisan government office that adjusts the money supply to influence the economy. All right, there's a couple of videos that talk about monetary policy in the Federal Reserve here a little bit. So this is called monetary policy, and again, it really tries to adjust interest rates. So this works with fiscal policy in order to get people to be spending more money. In this case, we're trying to focus on investment spending and loaning of money. All right, so increasing the money supply, how do we do that? So if we want to move the money supply, now there's a couple ways that they can do that. So if the money supply increases, a temporary surplus of money will occur at a 5% interest in this particular case. So the surplus will cause the interest rates to fall to 2%. And how does that affect the aggregate demand? All right, well, it's going to increase the money supply, which means a decrease in interest rates. All right, you following this? And decrease in interest rate will increase investment spending, so the I goes up, which will then increase aggregate demand. So shift in the money supply should increase or decrease aggregate demand depending on what you have or what it is that you're needing to do. So you have to know, you have to be able to link that a little bit to be able to understand the theory behind that. Okay. All right, so if we decrease the money supply, if the money supply decreases, a temporary shortage of money will occur at 5% interest. Okay, the shortage will cause the interest rate to rise to 10%. All right, and how is this going to affect it? So a decrease in the money supply is going to be an increase in interest rates, which would be a decrease in investment, which would decrease the aggregate demand. Okay, now the Federal Reserve plays a very important role when it comes to monetary policy, when it comes to adjusting or what we call expansionary or contractionary policy. The reason why they play an important role is because they're non-bipartisan, or they're non-partisan, or they're not really necessarily closely tied to Congress. They can make those tough decisions. So while our lawmakers have to worry about being reelected, the people at the Federal Reserve don't have to worry about that. So they can make tough decisions. All right, and you'll hear Clifford say this, but they're the people that take away the punch bowl when the party's getting too rowdy. So they would be people that would raise interest rates to try to adjust inflation and try to slow down the economy if it's speeding up too hot. Okay, and we've seen the Federal Reserve do a lot of different things during this COVID crisis. And so keep in mind what the Federal Reserve is doing in order to adjust our aggregate demand.